All right, good morning. Great to be back with you. A lot of people are unaware of the fact that one of the first Christian symbols was actually an anchor. It's believed, a lot of scholars believe, an anchor was actually a Christian symbol even before the cross was a Christian symbol. They found it in caves and in cemeteries. The reason for that goes back to a verse in Hebrews chapter 6, where the writer of Hebrews says, "Hope is the anchor for our souls." The recipients of the book of Hebrews were headed into persecution, and they understood that the anchor for their souls was their hope. But the enemy is very clever, and he has a couple of what I'm going to call hope stealers that are very prevalent in our culture today. They go by the name anxiety and worry, and they steal your hope away. And that's what we want to talk about this morning. I understand that this issue with anxiety and worry and fear, it's a real thing for people. So I don't want to in any way sound dismissive. I don't want to sound condescending. I get it, it's real. But I also understand if the only way you're going to get relief from the anxiety and worry is if everything in life is smooth sailing, you stand no chance for getting relief, because we live out our Christian lives in a broken and fallen world. Therefore, we have to understand what it is that gives us relief from this anxiety. Paul wrote, "Be anxious for nothing." Jesus talks about anxiety and worry in the Sermon on the Mount, which is the passage I'd encourage you to look at initially, Matthew chapter 6. We're going to look at two primary passages this morning. The first one is found in Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus is talking directly about this issue of anxiety and worry. I think the best way to think of this morning is wherever you're at, you can grow, you can do better. So Jesus says in verse 25 of chapter 6, "For this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life, as to what you will eat or what you will drink, or for your body as to what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow, nor do they reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? And who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to his life? Why are you worried about clothing? Observe the lilies of the field and how they grow. They do not toil, nor do they spin. Yet I say to you that not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith?" So Jesus is saying, you can trust me. Look at the birds, look at the flowers. You can trust me to take care of you. But then Matthew records this little statement, "You of little faith." That's one of Matthew's favorite phrases to use when talking about faith. He uses it a number of times. For example, you're familiar with the story where the disciples are on the Sea of Galilee and the wind comes up and Jesus walks on the water, and Peter wants to walk on the water. He gets out of the boat and then he starts to sink, and Jesus says to him, "You of little faith." It's the exact same phrase. There's another occasion where the disciples are coming back from being out on mission, and they say, there was this demon and we could not cast this demon out. What was the problem? What does Jesus say? It's because you have little faith. Exact same phrase. Matthew uses it often, but I think it can be misleading, at least the way we translate it in English. What do you hear when you hear "you of little faith"? What it sounds like is being said is we need more faith. Like it's an issue of quantity. And as long as that's what we're hearing, our tendency is then I have to try harder. I need to close my eyes, I need to clench my teeth, I need to bear down and conjure up more faith. But that's not biblical faith, and that will never work. That's more faith in faith than it is rightly understanding biblical faith. Actually, most Greek scholars agree. The better translation of that phrase is a poverty of faith. It's not talking so much about a quantity of faith. It's talking about the nature of faith, a certain quality of faith. The basic idea is our tendency is to have faith in ourselves. And that's a poverty of faith. It's an empty faith that's not going to get us there. But rather, we need to understand the nature of true faith. This is clearly seen in the passage where the disciples can't cast out the demon. And Jesus says, it's because you have little faith. Because he immediately follows it up by saying, actually, if you had a mustard seed size of faith, you could move a mountain. Now, don't miss that. If it's quantity of faith, he would have said something like, if you had a camel size faith, you could move a mountain. But actually what he picked was the smallest agricultural seed in the ancient Near East. And he said, actually, if you had the smallest bit of the right faith, you could move that mountain. In other words, what he was saying is the tiniest bit of the right faith is worth way more than a truckload of the wrong faith. Ultimately, it's about learning to trust Jesus. Probably all of us in the room would say, okay, that sounds good. It's what I need to do. How do I do that? God has a habit all through Scripture of a pattern where he gives us what we need to learn today in order to be ready for what we'll face tomorrow. This is beautifully illustrated in Mark chapter 6. So that's the other text I want us to look at this morning. Mark chapter 6. This is a familiar passage. There's two stories, but we need to understand the two stories together. So I want to pick it up in verse 30. The apostles have just been sent out on mission. They've just come back, and Jesus is debriefing with them. In verse 30, the apostles gathered together with Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest for a while." For there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. They went away to the boat to a secluded place by themselves. Now, one of the things that's worth noting is the repetition of the word secluded place. Jesus says it in verse 31, and then Mark repeats it in verse 32. It's the common Greek word that's usually translated desert or wilderness. So, for example, when the Gospels say Jesus went out into the wilderness to be tempted, it's this word. There's no question that what Mark is wanting to communicate in the miracle that follows is to see the correlation between what Jesus is about to do and what happened with the children of Israel when God fed them in the wilderness. It's Jesus' declaration, I am that God, now in flesh. The other thing that's worth noting in verse 31 is Jesus doesn't say to them, I need to take you out of the wilderness to find rest for your souls. What he just said is the opposite. Actually, we need to go into the wilderness because that's where you're going to learn what you need to learn to find rest for your souls. Verse 33, the people saw them going, and many recognized them and ran there together on foot from all the cities and got there ahead of them. When Jesus went to shore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. So the crowd begins to see the boat. They rush ahead. They're there before Jesus arrives. And Jesus specifically says they're like sheep without a shepherd, which causes us to think back to Moses toward the end of his life, looked at the children of Israel and said they're like sheep without a shepherd. And he assigned Joshua to be their shepherd in the wilderness. And of course, the Greek version of the name Joshua is Jesus. Mark also tells us that Jesus taught them many things. But what's curious about the way Mark records this is he doesn't tell us anything that Jesus taught them. That's not his focus. His focus is on 12 disciples who have to learn some lessons in order to trust him and follow him. So that is the focus of Mark's gospel. When it was already quite late, his disciples came to him and said, "This place is desolate, and it is already quite late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." Now, I would say that's good leadership. The disciples are looking around. They're in a very secluded place. We got a massive crowd. We have no food. The sun is going down. We probably better dismiss them, let them go find food to eat. That seems like a reasonable suggestion to me. But Jesus doesn't see it that way. Verse 37, but answering them, you give them something to eat. The you there is emphatic, meaning you do it. I'm sure at that point the disciples kind of looked at one another like, what is he talking about? As a matter of fact, that's how they respond. Verse 37, and they said to him, shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? This is a very disrespectful answer. It's very kind of crabby. We already know that they were tired. They hadn't even had time to eat. They sound very grumpy. And when they respond, it's very sarcastic. Yeah, let's just stick our hand in our big bag of money and pull out 200 denarii. That's about 8 months worth of salary. In our terms, it'd be like, yes, let's just put our hand into the bag of money that we don't have and pull out $40,000 and go buy food for 5,000 people. That sounds like a really good plan. But of course, it doesn't faze Jesus. And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go look. I love the way that's worded. He asked them a question, how many loaves do you have? And you get the impression they're kind of looking at each other. Like, what is he talking about? What is he saying? What are we supposed to do? If you've ever, as a parent, said something to one of your children and they just stare at you. And finally it's like, go do what I said, like go mow the lawn. What's so confusing about that? That's Jesus in this moment. They're all looking at each other like, what is he talking about? And he's like, go, look, I told you to do something. And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. I'm guessing when they came back and said that, they said that with a certain tone. It's like, yeah, great plan. We found 5 loaves, 2 fish. That's sure to feed 5,000 people. There's kind of an attitude there. Plan B, what's plan B, Jesus? But Jesus goes on, verse 39. He commanded them all to sit down by groups on the green grass. They sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, which is reminiscent of Moses, grouping the people by hundreds and fifties. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. Looking up toward heaven, he blessed the food and he broke the loaves. And he kept giving them to the disciples to set before them. And he divided up the 2 fish among them all. They ate and they were satisfied. And they picked up 12 full baskets of broken pieces, and also of the fish. There were 5,000 men who ate loaves. So Jesus sits them down, takes the 5 loaves and 2 fish. The actual grammar is that the miracle was in the hands of Jesus. He just kept breaking the bread, breaking the bread, breaking the bread, and passing it out until everyone not only got a bite to eat, but ate until they were satisfied. Again, very reminiscent of manna in the wilderness, where the text says they all ate till they were satisfied. It's interesting that there are 12 baskets used to collect the leftovers. I think the reason for that is because there were 12 disciples that he was trying to help. Each had a basket. Each brought back a basket full of leftovers. There were more in the basket left over than when they started. Each of them had a basket full. There's no way they could have missed the fact that something miraculous just happened here. Jesus was clearly identifying himself as Yahweh, God of the Old Testament. I am the same God that fed my children in the wilderness manna from heaven. But now I have taken on human flesh, and I just fed my children in the wilderness with 5 loaves and 2 fish. An absolutely amazing miracle. But this is what I would consider a low-risk miracle. What I mean by that is if Jesus couldn't pull it off, then they just go home. They go home hungry. They get up the next morning, they go on with their lives. But this low-risk miracle was intended to prepare them for something when the stakes were higher. So we go on. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. You get the impression he's setting them up for something else. He made them get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he himself was sending the crowd away. After bidding them farewell, he left for the mountain to pray. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land, seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them at about the fourth watch of the night. So he came to them walking on the sea, and he intended to pass them by. So Jesus dismisses the crowd. Evening comes. Jesus sees his disciples out on the boat on the Sea of Galilee, and they're struggling. The winds have come up. The situation has gotten serious. It's good to remind ourselves that several of the disciples on the boat were professional fishermen. It wasn't because they didn't know what they were doing. They made their living in a boat on the Sea of Galilee. So this tells you this was getting very serious. The fourth watch means from 3 in the morning to 6 in the morning. We're just going to call it the middle of the night. So I love the way Mark records this. It's so matter of fact. So what does Jesus do? He just walks on the water. I mean, come on, who does that? Who just walks on the water? Answer, God does. God does. Mark, very matter-of-factly. So Jesus walks on the water. But then he says something rather strange. He intended to just pass by them. That's a rather strange thing to say. What does that mean? Does that mean Jesus was so embarrassed by his leadership team, he was just going to hide himself and walk by them like, I hope nobody even sees that I know these people because they're really embarrassing right now? No, I don't think that's it. So what does that mean? There's a fair amount of discussion around this phrase, but I'm confident that what is intended is that in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, this is a phrase that is commonly used to reference what we call theophanies, which is when God took on human flesh and appeared before people in the Old Testament. This is the exact same wording. So the intent is for Jesus to come by them, making it clear this is God in the flesh. Just in case you missed it, boys, just a few hours ago, we had 5 loaves and 2 fish and well over 5,000 people, and I fed everyone bread in the wilderness till they were satisfied. In case you missed it, you picked up the leftover baskets. That's kind of a miracle. And now, just in case you don't really understand, I'm walking on the water. Yes, the God of the Old Testament that parted the sea is now in human flesh, and he's trampling on the sea because he is God in the flesh. Don't miss it. And if that's true, there's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason for fear. There's no reason for worry. I got this. That's what Jesus was wanting them to understand. Verse 49, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed that he was a ghost, and they cried out, for they saw him and were terrified. Now, I don't have any problem identifying with being terrified. Can you imagine what it would be like to come to grips with the fact that your friend that you walk with, your friend that you eat with, your friend that you spend time with, is actually the eternal creator God of the universe in human flesh. That would take some serious convincing to believe that could possibly be true. So they're terrified. But immediately he spoke with them, and he said to them, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were utterly astonished. If you go back to Mark chapter 4, there's another incident on the sea in a boat. Only on that occasion, Jesus is sleeping in the boat. And they fear they're going to perish, so they wake Jesus up and they say, "Jesus, don't you care that we're going to perish?" And Jesus stands up, and the text says he rebuked the wind and the sea, and they obeyed. And Mark says they looked at one another and they said, "Who is this man that even the wind and the sea obey him?" They're still astonished. They're still trying to figure it out. Who is this man? When Jesus says, "Take courage, it is I," the actual Greek here isn't "it is I." It is simply "I am." It's the exact same phrase that Jesus used in the Garden of Gethsemane. When the Roman soldiers came to get Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane to arrest him, and Jesus said to them, "Who do you come looking for?" They said, "We come for Jesus of Nazareth." And what does Jesus say? Jesus says, "I am." You remember what happened? Everybody fell to the ground. It's this absolutely magnificent moment where in that moment, Jesus was declaring himself to be the great I am. And if I wanted out of this, I could do it at any moment. So when Jesus steps on the boat, what he says to his disciples is, "Boys, you still don't get it. That's why you're afraid. I am. I am the God of the Old Testament. I am Yahweh that appeared to Moses in the burning bush and declared himself to be I am." He has now taken on human flesh and is walking before you in sandals. That's who I am. If you could just understand that, you would not be afraid. You got to trust me. Then Mark is the only gospel writer of the four that offers this commentary, this editorial comment in verse 52. For they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. What Mark is saying is Jesus intended to teach them through the feeding of the 5,000 that he's God in the flesh. I'm Yahweh of the Old Testament in human flesh. I fed my children in the wilderness. I fed my children here in the wilderness. I'm God. You can trust me. That they would understand that in a low-risk environment in order that they would not be afraid when things got much more serious on the sea. But they missed it. It's kind of shocking, isn't it? Like, how do you miss it? How do you not get it? How can you not put the pieces together, connect the dots? Their hearts were hardened. In this text, simply saying they just didn't get it. It reminds me of the children of Israel. I'm constantly baffled by these people. How can you not get it? They knew that their God had brought Pharaoh to his knees through the 10 plagues. They knew that. When God led them out, he appeared as a pillar of cloud by day and a fire by night. Can you imagine how absolutely spectacular that would have been? Sometimes people say, I wish God would just write me a message in the sky. For the children of Israel, he did. You can't miss it. He's right there. And then he led them to the sea, and in the moment of truth, he parted the Red Sea and delivered them on dry land. When they thought they were going to die of thirst, he provides water. When they think they're going to starve to death, he provides food. I mean, come on, how can you not get it? Yet they get to the moment of truth when they're on the border, ready to enter the land of promise, and their decision is, we can't trust him. Hebrews says that wasn't because they didn't have enough evidence. They had more than enough evidence. It was actually a moral decision. It was an act of rebellion. We will not believe. And it cost them their chance to enter the land of promise. The disciples, like the children of Israel, still didn't get it. But they would get it. Little by little, Jesus would patiently show them who he is. And they would finally get it. And Jesus would use them to change the world. God never asks for blind faith. He's not asking for a leap of faith. That's not what biblical faith is. Go back to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6. What does Jesus say to them? Look at the birds. Look at the flowers. Hello, look around you. I did all that. Don't you think if I could do all that for the birds and the flowers, that you can trust me to take care of you? Because you mean way more to me than the birds and the flowers. That's not a leap of faith. That's not blind faith. It's like the evidence is right there. Just look at it. But at the end of that discussion, Jesus says something that I think is very helpful. Verse 34. So, in summary, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. One of the big problems with worry and anxiety is we're always thinking about tomorrow. We're worried about tomorrow. What about tomorrow? Do you know the research shows that 91% of what we worry about never comes to pass? 91%. Worrying about tomorrow is a big waste of energy. But it's more than that. When we are so occupied with worrying about tomorrow, we're not paying attention to today. Consequently, we miss the moments we need to see today in order to learn what we need to learn today to get us ready for whatever it is we're going to face tomorrow. Anxiety and worry are hope stealers. We're so focused on things that may or may not ever come to pass that we miss the moment today. I'm absolutely confident God is going to give you what you need today to get you ready for whatever it is you're going to face tomorrow. But He can't believe that for you. He can provide it. You have to see it. You have to choose to believe it. So I don't know what's heavy on your heart this morning. There's a lot of stuff going on. I understand that. But what would it look like for you to trust Jesus today? Let's just take this one day at a time. What would it look like for you to trust Jesus today? And we'll take care of tomorrow. One day at a time. And may we never forget that the Jesus that walks with you, the Jesus that saved you, the Jesus that loves you, the Jesus that is coming back for you, is absolutely sufficient for whatever it is you're facing today. Because, of course, He is the great I am. Our Father, we're thankful for Jesus. Lord, there's a lot of messed up stuff in this world, a lot of things that bring pain and heartache, confusion. But Lord, may we just trust you today. Learn what we need to learn today in order to be ready for whatever it is we'll face tomorrow. Lord, this I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.